my third session of Congress. My first two, I was in the majority, which I must say I prefer. And really what I think was so striking to me is that before I got into Congress, it felt to me, and I've spoken to a bunch of different people, it felt to a lot of us like our nation was a little bit stuck. In other words, we knew that we should be investing in Head Start instead of the Bureau of Prisons to get better outcomes. We knew that we should be investing and it would be more cost effective and better for people's lives if we put money into nutrition programs and not to diabetes care. We knew that we should fix our crumbling roads and bridges and not wait for a catastrophe of a road collapsing. And yet, for some reason, even though there was wide agreement across the country on how we might move forward, we just couldn't seem to make change. And that's why the last session of Congress was so amazing to me, that with these razor thin majorities in the House and the Senate, we were able to pass legislation that is going to change the very way people live their lives.
Right.
It's going to change how we invest in infrastructure, how we invest in climate, and a clean power system. It's going to change how we invest in research and development and the job opportunities for our kids, how we compete globally by making sure that not only was the last century the American century, but this century is going to be the American century because we are the most innovative place on earth. So these are all of the things that we did in the last session of Congress. And I'll tell you, I can see the reverberations of this legislation in my district already. Because largely what it did was set the table for companies to invest in the future. Because with the backing of the government, as the federal government made these new regulations, as we said, we were going to invest in certain technologies, private investment then came in and said, okay, this is where our country's headed. We're now really at the table competing. So it's been amazing. I've been to medical device companies. I've been to structural engineering companies. I've been to pharmaceutical companies. You name it, everyone seems to be expanding. And the biggest complaint I'm hearing now is they just don't have the workforce to meet their needs, which is quite frankly a great problem to have.
Well, let me ask you this question. One of the things that I hear, and people who, I have a woman where I go to physical therapy. She doesn't vote except for presidents. And I'm going to give her some, when I interview specific New Jersey things that the governor did in terms of the $1,800 tax break that you're getting on your property insurance if you make under $250,000 a year, not property insurance, property taxes. And the other thing I hear people say, oh, it's all going to cost too much money. Now, didn't in the infrastructure bill or in one of those two bills, isn't there a 15% tax on corporations so that we kind of break even? Because I pay 27% after my write-offs. Most people do. And shouldn't it be fair that the big people that are making all the money should be paying their fair share to build our roads and to build our tax breaks and keep Social Security clean? Even what's happening on the floor today was kind of frightening. They want to cut millionaires' taxes and cut from the Internal Revenue Service before they help our partners and allies across the world.
I think this is where the chaos in Congress really comes home to roost, if you will. When you have unserious people in the House of Representatives, people who are more concerned about their own political partisanship and their own talking points than they are about actual policy and governing, you come to a place where some of this edifice starts to get cracks in the structure. And by that, I mean exactly what you said, Pat, that there was a bill put forth that I'm going to vote against in the near future. And part of the, quote, pay for, or part of the way that the speaker envisioned paying for this bill was that he would cut a bunch of IRS agents. What those of us who've worked as lawyers and stuff understand is that the IRS has real trouble making some of the complicated cases against some of the most wealthy people who are tax cheats, because they're using complicated methods to hide their wealth offshore. And so then they just go after W-2 wage earners like you and me. If we're going to really create a fair taxation system and have the revenue that comes in to build our roads and bridges, we are going to need to have those IRS agents. And because this bill cuts them, this bill actually adds $12 billion to the national deficit. So a bill that is supposed to cut spending from a group of people that claim that their number one concern is our deficit actually adds $12 billion to the deficit. It's kind of unfathomable, but it shows what happens when you are governing by talking point instead of actually governing according to what's really good for our country and the American people.
Right. Now, I was with you. We were having coffee with the girls, and made a list. If you remember, you were making a list of the specific bills that were passed. And I'm not sure if it was the infrastructure or if it was the Inflation Reduction Act. Tell me about a couple of those that actually affect everyday people.
Oh my gosh. It's great. So in the last session of Congress, when we had the majority, even though, like I said, razor thin, we were able to pass the infrastructure bill, which really supports the Gateway Tunnel project, which I've long been a supporter of. In fact, I'm really concerned because the projected transportation and infrastructure bill that Republicans are putting on the floor cuts, I think, about 99% of funding to the Northeast Rail Corridor, which would really be devastating. I know, but I think the Senate will vote against it. I think even the New York Republicans are contemplating voting against it because it's so horrible for our region, so horrible for our climate goals, because we know that the majority of our carbon emissions come from our cars. However, well, let's talk about the good times. In the last session of Congress, when we passed the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill and law that really will fund the Gateway Tunnel, which will fund much of our programming that will help the climate, electric vehicle funding and chargers, some of the transmission lines, which we need to do more with. We also have
I can stop you for 1 second, just to interrupt and say that gets us off of foreign oil, doesn't it?
That will help us get us off of foreign reliance on foreign oil. We also have the CHIPS and Science Act, which is fantastic for New Jersey. It invests in research and development. It invests in producing high-end semiconductor chips here. I was just speaking to some representatives who are opening up what they call fabs to produce these high-end chips, and the jobs it's going to create and the benefit to our economy it will create. And the resilience it'll create in our supply chains. No longer will we have to rely on China, for example, for some of these lower end chips, but then we'll also have redundancies in the system with not just Taiwan, but other areas producing the high end semiconductor chips. Also, the key investments in research and development so we can compete on things like AI and quantum and bioengineering and all of those high-end technologies that we invented, but we've lost market share to places like China over the years. So we are going to better compete there. And then we've also invested in so many things across the board, even prior to that in our ARP funding. Some of that financing has come to had been coming to the end of that tranche of funding. So that's why now moving forward, we're looking at making sure we have funding for childcare, for example. As I mentioned, that critical workforce issue will rely on getting more childcare into New Jersey so that parents can get to work and can help fuel our economy and have those great jobs.
Yeah. Now talk to me a little bit about to get the Congress. Now you've got bipartisan, so you've gotten both Republicans and Democrats, and because you were there, a lot of these great things got passed. Talk to me about. I know you guys tried because I have it here. And what does HR mean, by the way? But it's
House transportation.
Oh, I was trying to figure that out.
So that's a bill that originated in the House.
Okay, because we have HR 661 going on right now, and HR 340 as I've been watching C-SPAN. And I watched this morning, early this morning when I was making coffee, there was the Journal was on and people were calling in. And it was my favorite thing to hear, as I always talk to you about you. People had such misinformation about history. I wanted to cry. That's why I want to do this podcast, at least get out facts, no lies, facts. And one of the things that I feel is that if Congress is being paid for by 30,000, that's the top 0.1% in the country, big business people, and then there's 300,000 is total is the top 1%. Then there's the 320 million of us. But if Congress with the super PACs are only being paid by them, they're doing the tax break for them. Now, I know you guys tried to pass this bill, the HR1, and it didn't get through the Senate. Is there anything on the books to try to, again, bring that back up again, or is it going to be impossible until we get a different speaker?
It's going to be impossible until we have a different speaker and a different Congress. So that was HR 1 through 10. If you see an HR 1 through 10, those are the first bills in a new Congress that sort of show the priorities of that Congress. So that was our priority in the last two Congresses to do better election reform so that people in this country have more faith in our election system, but also to make voting available more easily to people so more people engage in our democracy.
Yeah.
And Pat, we're coming up on time, so I think the Congresswoman actually has to get going.
Uh-oh, she's like Scott.
Watching the floor now. Yeah, I know the coming in to yank me.
Well, I appreciate it. Maybe we can do it again when you have more time. That'll be never. Are you going to be at that rally on? I'm not going to make it on Sunday. Are you guys going to make it, or no? You're going to be in the house. She doesn't know.
I think I'm going to. I'm not sure if I'll make it or at what time. We're kind of redoing the schedule as on the go, so we'll see.
Well, I have to be out of time. Well, Mikie, and I cannot thank you enough. I cannot thank you enough for making the sacrifices that you make.
You're awesome, and I will. I've seen many of the sacrifices you make for our country, and I want to thank you for all the work you do. But always great to see you, and we'll talk soon. I may even see you this weekend if you're around at other events, and otherwise I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you very much. Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill. Bye-bye.